All right, let's talk Oklahoma Sooners football. Look, obviously, this time of year, we got spring ball picking up across the entire country. We're seeing what a lot of programs are starting to look like as they integrate new players, new transfers, freshmen, build off the 2023 campaign, and the Oklahoma Sooners are certainly doing that. But as we've talked about ad nauseum, Brent Venables has done a phenomenal job focusing on the future. He's building a long-term program in Norman, and his latest news is further proof of that. Let's get directly into the report, and then we'll talk about it on the other side. The Oklahoma Sooners have landed a mid-addition to their 2025 class. As a result, they're back on their way up to the cycle's recruiting class rankings from being at number 8 with the loss of Jay Nickens, who opened up his recruiting, to all the way back up to number 5 with their latest commitment. It was a big story Friday. The Crimson and Cream secured a commitment from Torrey Blaylock on Good Friday. The 4-star ranks as a top 20 running back nationally at number 17 overall and the number 33 player in the state of Texas. Look, obviously getting Blaylock is a huge addition for Oklahoma, but again, it's all part of the strategy that Venables is using to help put this team in a great position for the future. Mize, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this move, but first, Oklahoma fans in the comment section below, transitioning to the SEC, brand new dynamic, a lot of new matchups, a lot of fun matchups in the comment section. Give us the one game next season you're looking forward to more than any other. There's a lot of really interesting ones. Really curious what you have to say. One game you're really looking forward to in the comment section below. But Mize, give me your thoughts on the Sooners and just everything going on with this program right now.
Yeah, Nick, I think this is a big move for the Sooners in about 3 different ways that I think are very interesting. One, you talked about it, the move to the SEC. They're going to have to get a more aggressive style as far as being able to open up the pass with the run. In addition of more talented running backs, like a guy like Blaylock, are going to be very good. Obviously, Gavin Sawchuk jumped out last year. He's a guy who's going to be very productive going forward. But I think an addition of a guy like Torrey Blaylock is going to be very good for Oklahoma as well because of the different things he can bring to the table. He goes on later in the article, and Blaylock talks about how the new offensive coordinator talks about the ways they're going to use Blaylock and not just run the ball. They're primarily going to be running him, but he also is a threat, catching the ball out of the backfield. He's really great on those inside zone and counter runs as well. He's going to use his speed, but as well, this guy has a lot of power to him. I think he could be a very interesting pickup for the Oklahoma Sooners and a guy that can plug into the offense right away in a few niche situations if Sawchuk is going to remain that key back going forward. But I think there's a couple of other things we can talk about the addition of Blaylock to this 2025 recruiting class. This is now the 6th pickup from the state of Texas for the Sooners. I think they now have more players from the state of Texas than they do Oklahoma. Texas, now that we're going to refer to it as Lower Oklahoma at this point, because of the Sooners' domination of recruiting in the state of Texas. I think that's a very key thing going forward because another team coming into the SEC is going to rival Oklahoma is, of course, Texas. So I think getting as many guys out of that state you can that are premier players is going to be good, and Torrey Blaylock is one of those guys. He's a very, very talented player. So I think overall, there's a lot of different abilities that Blaylock has that he can bring to this offense of Oklahoma that's going to help them go forward in the SEC, but also Oklahoma's domination of the recruiting cycle in Texas shows that they're looking forward to the future and trying to expand and get as much talent out of these premier states that are close to them as possible.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, but there is a reality facing Oklahoma and Texas as well, right? As Texas A&M and Missouri found out a number of years ago, moving into the SEC, especially those early years, right? There's going to be a lot of ups and downs, right? You may have great seasons, but it's going to be a brutal schedule, a brutal slog. It's a completely different environment than any other conference. The SEC schedule is a gauntlet, and it always is and probably always will be. And with that in mind, you cannot fall victim to having 1 or 2 bad recruiting classes. You have to be solid because you know the LSUs, the Alabamas, they're always going to be recruiting at a high level, building that depth necessary to survive the gauntlet. And I think that's exactly what Brent Venables has done this entire offseason in terms of the 2025 class. We saw a lot of that with the 2024 class going back to last year. He's trying to build a solid, complete team. He's not trying to build a team around 1 or 2 stars. You notice where he's focusing his recruiting efforts. Obviously, he's trying to go after the biggest 4- and 5-star guys if he can get them, but he's not throwing all his eggs in, hey, can I get the top quarterback or the top receiver in the country, and that's what's going to take us into the SEC with momentum. No, he's building complete team, focusing on solid football players on all positions, both sides of the football, building that depth necessary to survive that SEC gauntlet. Texas A&M, one of the problems they've had in the SEC and Missouri too, is that despite having a good year or two, that it really just hinges on the fact they had one great year of recruiting. They were able to survive that gauntlet on talent alone, but the next year they have a few injuries. They don't have a great recruiting year. They don't have the depth, and it's just a terrible season, right? That's what those programs have gone through. Programs like Alabama, LSU, Georgia, the reason they're consistently good isn't just their top line talent, it's their depth. And that's exactly what Venables is trying to replicate. The dumb programs, they try and say, okay, let me go toe to toe with Georgia, Alabama, LSU with the top flight guys, and that's how we're going to compete. That's stupid. That's moronic. You're not going to win that way. But if you focus on, hey, let me build a solid depth, a solid foundation, a complete football team, then you can compete through the gauntlet. Because the reality is the Alabamas, Georgias, LSU, so on, they've got to go through that gauntlet too. And the team with the most depth will survive and win. That's why Alabama does well. That's why Georgia has done well. It's not just the fact that they have 5 stars and all these big name guys. It's because they've got a lot of depth everywhere. That's what Venables is trying to replicate, and I think it's a great strategy.
Yeah, Nick, and to your point, I think Oklahoma knows that, and they understand that, and that is like why you said they're trying to hit this recruiting class so quickly, and it's proven already to be very successful, because if you look at the SEC rankings for recruiting classes, Oklahoma is number 2 just behind LSU. So far, to the this mentality they have of can't have a bad recruiting class coming into the SEC, they're doing a pretty good job. LSU, obviously a powerhouse, a lot of talent in that area, so they're going to be hard to compete with. But I think coming in second place in the SEC so far, it's 2025 class. It is very early to judge how the class is going to be, but all we can judge is what is on paper now. And they're looking, like they said, they're taking what you talked about, can't have a bad recruiting class if you want to compete in the SEC very seriously. And they're competing with these other teams in the SEC very good so far. And I think just if they get in there, they get their feet wet, and they don't completely blow it in their first season in the SEC, they're just going to get stronger among those teams as well. I think they could get themselves a foothold in the recruiting market as around those teams as well. I think it's a very interesting premise for them going forward.